So who's a victim? We think of a victim as somebody that got hurt, somebody who was victimized through whatever means. Could be physical, could be financial, there's different types of ways to victimize a person. Definition: the party who has legal standing to prosecute the person who commit a criminal offense, because this is criminal law. Usually the government. The victim, in fact, is the person who is the subject of the criminal act. That is the victim, in fact, the primary. There's secondary victims as well. Often the secondary victims have no standing. Remember the term standing, because without standing, you cannot take legal action against the offender. You must have standing. The Violent Crime Control Law Enforcement Act defines any individual against whom an offense has been committed. Any individual. Let's check this out. What happened? I'm not sure if there's audio or not.
Let it shine on me, let it shine on. Let your light from the lighthouse shine on me. Let it shine on me, let it shine on. Let your light from the lighthouse shine on me. When they give out of him, must I be carried to the sky on flower bed of Eve? And must I fight to win the prize and seal so bloody sea? Let it shine on me, let it shine on me. Your light from the lighthouse, shine on me, shine on me, let it shine on me. Your light from the lighthouse, shine on me.
Hello, my name is Lynn Kimbrough of the Denver District Attorney's Office, and today we'll explore the history of victims' rights in America, featuring Colorado, which has been a leader in modern reform. We'll begin by stepping back in time to look at the emergence of laws as they pertain to victims' rights. Then we'll examine more recent developments in the United States as victim advocacy began to take hold. And we'll observe the cutting edge of victims' rights in an effort to reveal what's next for our society. The purpose of this film is to provide you with a historical storyline, a better understanding of our federal and state victims' rights laws, and to create a sense of tradition that you will carry with you while you serve victims of crime. The victim rights movement in America appears to be wrought from the relatively recent efforts of the 20th century, but the original ideas are property of the distant past and far-off places. The victim rights narrative begins in Babylonia in the time of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was one of the first to consider victims' rights and restorative justice. Although harsh and oftentimes inhumane, Hammurabi's laws and code of ethics highlighted protection for vulnerable victims and required the offender to help make the victim whole or risk losing a body part. Justinian I of Rome furthered the endeavors of Hammurabi by creating a code that placed special emphasis on the separation of public and private laws, a tradition we value today. Also during antiquity, Jewish law paralleled the ideas of an eye for an eye, the most strident form of victim restitution. As we move forward in time, our focus shifts west to England, where concepts of common law were developing by the 11th century. Common law blended elements and ideas of the Hammurabi Code, the Justinian Code, and a traditional body of unwritten legal precedents created by local courts and administrators. These laws were refined and adopted with the ushering in of the Magna Carta in 1215. The Magna Carta was the first to suggest that everyone, noble and common, had basic natural rights that were ordained by God and guaranteed by the state. This enlightened thought would travel across the Atlantic and prove to be the most important notion in the design of the United States body of law. That being said, America would still have its own unique learning process. In America, founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were taking cues from the enlightened thoughts of men like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. The forefathers of America drew from an amalgamation of common law, written statutes enacted by the legislative body, and the precedents laid out in the Constitution. However, the victim was still carrying the brunt of the responsibility. From the time of the earliest settlers in the 16th century until early in the 19th century, the victim often acted as the arresting police officer, investigator, prosecutor, and even had to hire a circuit judge to come to his or her jurisdiction to try their case. In most cases, the judge would order restitution payment to the victim as punishment. By the 1850s, a new focus was drawing attention away from the singular victim and placing it on the greater community. Public servant jobs surged with the creation of extensive law enforcement entities and elected public prosecutors. These new men of the state provoked a spotlight on adjudication for the total society rather than the individual victims. Also, restitution owed by the perpetrator was seen as owed to the state and no longer to the victim. A wider berth was afforded to the reform of the convict rather than making the victim whole. Penitentiaries where felons could do their penance cropped up across the U.S., while victims' rights decayed in the civil court system for the next 120 years. The modern law and order movement marked the end of this era and established a base for a new way of viewing victims' rights. There were, however, moments where victims' rights issues resurfaced and created new kinds of social services.
There's one simple vision hack anyone can use to improve vision, so you can say goodbye to your optometrist for good.
Okay,
Did you know that
that's
vision
part
impairments have not...
of that video, but you get the idea. A little historic perspective that back in the day, the obligation fell on the victim to seek justice. And then 100 and something years later, the government steps in and said, well, maybe we as a society should have a governing body that takes the responsibility of holding people accountable for their actions. And that started the idea of a police state. An individual can file a complaint to the government, but only the government can actually take action, a criminal action, against the individual. You always still have the civil court venue if you're not happy with the criminal action. But criminally, only the government. That's why when you look at these cases, it's always U.S. versus state of California versus whoever. Because only the government can take criminal action against an individual. Your book may or may not tell you this, but you're going to need to know that there's only two ways to file a criminal action against the individual. The one you hear in the textbooks, in the Constitution, is via an indictment. Okay? Via indictment, where the county court, the grand jury convenes, and they hear the case from the government. The opposing party can also present information if they choose to. The grand jury decides, is there enough information to charge this person with a criminal act? If so, they issue the indictment. States, counties, they found that process too cumbersome, too expensive. It just wasn't what they were looking for. So they came up with a process, and get this. Their charging document is called information. The charging document, if you look at it, information. That document is the one they use to charge someone with a criminal action. It was challenged all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that an indictment process versus the information process was so similar that their constitutional rights were not being violated. Therefore, the states can continue to charge someone using the document they call information. It's ridiculous if you ever get to criminal court and you look at the paperwork to see information. Okay, I didn't think it was that important until I found out that is what carries all the weight. Okay, so the information or indictment is the only two ways to charge someone with a criminal allegation. Golden age of the victim. Historical epoch during which victims had well-recognized rights, including personal say in imposing punishments and the apprehension of offenders. Later on, Western legal tradition, victims were expected only to provide evidence of a crime to testify against those who harmed them, who wronged them. Think of the West as it's being developed. All these beautiful Western movies. The vigilantes, get a rope, we're gonna hang them. They're cattle rustlers. How do they call it? Civil justice, Western justice. Okay, I love Western movies. That's wrong. Okay, it's wrong because the people finding guilt in the offender are the ones that emotions are so freaking high. They want revenge. They don't want justice. They want somebody's hide. And that happened for a while. And that's what they're talking here, the golden age, where the victim could actually find the person who caused them harm and take justice into their own hand. Shoot them, make them pay, make it right one way or another. But it was up to the victim to decide. And things just went crazy. Doesn't work. Victim-centered justice been transformed into state-centered justice, which we have, under which the victim plays a mere token role as a personal target of the criminal activity. I would go so far as to say that in the older days, I mean, they're over here on the pendulum. They could do whatever they want. When they find the offender, they can hang them, they can shoot them, they can pretty much do whatever they wanted to them. Now we're way over here, where the victim has little to no say in what happens in the proceedings. And that's wrong. I really think it's a crock. But that's just the way it works. Not much has changed till 1960. California passed the first American legislation intended to help a victim, and it's a joke. It really is. It's called Victim Impact Statement. During the sentencing phase, the victim can actually come forward and read a statement, make a statement, have someone on their behalf make a statement, telling the court how this wrong has affected their livelihoods. They can't live anymore. It's a terrible thing. And the court's supposed to take this statement into consideration before sentencing. They don't. Okay, they don't. I've been in, let's just say 100 different cases. I've been in chambers with the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney. They hash out everything that's going to happen in the courtroom. The judge agrees to a sentence that the DA wants and that the defense can live with. Then they come out into the courtroom. I always think of it as a play, and they all have a role. So the victim comes up, makes all this, tears and crying, the dramatic presentation. But the judge already knows what's going to happen, and he cannot deviate because he agreed to it in chambers. It's a done deal. Does that seem like the victim has any voice to you guys? Maybe, no? Hell no. It's just sitting there in these cases and knowing what's going to happen and watching this victim pour their hearts out. It's rough. I even asked, how could you live with yourself? Didn't that move you? I said, well, yeah, we have a calendar. We got to keep the wheels of justice rolling. We got another case. But that's just the way it works. Many states then joined the victims' compensation bandwagon. Today, all 50 states have passed some type of legislation providing monetary compensation to victims. How many think this is a good idea? Monetary compensation to the victim. Nobody likes it? Joe? Yeah. Okay, so, you're mom and dad. You have an 18-year-old daughter. And I'm sorry guys, but this happens. She was raped, killed, murdered, and it was terrible what happened to her. So they catch the offenders. It was 2 guys, rape in concert. They're charged. They come from affluent families. Money. They have good attorneys. The attorneys talk to the DA. They finagle a deal. The kids will do 2 years in juvenile. 2 years. They can get out with good behavior. Maybe a 5-year probation. But they have to pay the victim's family $100,000 restitution. Remember, this is your daughter. How are you going to feel when the judge reads that verdict? Tells you these 2 people, these 2 guys who just did this brutal act to your little girl are going to get off with 2 years juvenile. Possibility of early release with good behavior, 5-year probation, but you get $100,000. Good deal?
No.
Why? You got your restitution?
Because they just get to pretty much walk. Just because they have money.
Because they have money. Then, as a parent, you're sitting in court. As the judge is reading the verdict, you look over and see those 2 guys sitting at the defense table, and they had smiles on their face. Like, yeah, we just got away with something. Wouldn't that make your blood boil? The intent to provide some relief to the victim, I get that. But we're talking about criminal acts. Man, I'm an eye for an eye kind of guy. That's why I would say we could talk about punishment. I've got some very creative ideas when it comes to punishment. And thank God he put me in a place where I was able to invoke my kind of punishment. I worked death row in San Quentin. These guys are not good guys. Okay, they get what they get. And they knew that. And most of the sergeants that I worked with up there, we kind of believe the same way. Yeah. These people, they're not even human. And you have to meet them and see them, how they behave to understand what I'm saying. To see this, man, well, you're gonna have to make restitution. I get the idea. Okay, so if they got the money, it's not a big deal. Let's change the scenario. The infraction wasn't quite so serious. It was a property crime. Your home was vandalized. You lost $20,000 worth of property. You have the culprits in court. And the judge finds them guilty, sends them to county jail for 2-3 years, because this isn't their first offense. Orders them to pay restitution, $20,000. These kids are going to have to pay you restitution. The kids, 20-year-old, never had a job in their life. They're drug addicts. That's why they ripped you off to begin with. What are the odds you're ever going to see a nickel out of that $20,000 the judge just ordered? Huh, Joe? 0! I was in court one day when a victim came in, wanted to be heard, because the judge had ordered restitution. I don't know how much it was, but they ordered restitution. So they put this on calendar, the judge saw it, the victim gets up to the podium, is crying about how the person that was supposed to pay him, that's about what the judge wanted to do, hasn't paid him a dime, they filed liens, they've done this, and the judge has to do something, make sure these people pay them what the judge said they had to pay them. The judge actually told them, you want me to squeeze blood out of a lot? And that's your job. Next case. That's about it. So even though you get ordered restitution, chances of you actually ever collecting, slim. That's the justice system. Okay, modern state victims compensation programs require applicants to meet certain eligibility. What else? Victims who are responsible in some significant way for their own victimization are generally not eligible for reimbursement. I'm not too sure about the first one, where if you were a victim and something happened to you, there's programs that will help compensate, to offset your loss. Don't know about that one. But the other one, you can't victimize yourself and then expect to be reimbursed. People actually do that. Okay, so don't plan that I'm gonna go wreck my car, for example. Then the insurance is gonna have to buy me a new one because I got full coverage. There are 7 different schools of thoughts on victims' compensation. Strict liability claims that compensation to victims because the social contract between the victim and society has been broken. Strict liability, that kind of falls more under civil, but there is a place for it in criminal. For example, these big auto manufacturers, the only one I can always think of is the Ford. The Bronco, I guess it was rolling over because the wheelbase was too narrow or something. They knew it was a problem. These cars are rolling over. So if you happen to buy one of those vehicles and were injured or had some kind of a loss, Ford, under strict liability, must compensate you for your loss. And I think they ended up just dealing with individuals as the losses occurred until they can modify the defect in their vehicle. They don't want it to go to a class action. Okay, class actions are never good for a manufacturer. Why, somebody says, why? What's the difference? I'll tell you why. Under strict liability, if I filed a claim, the insurance or the dealer, somebody's gonna make restitution on my claim. That's it. They're gonna make me whole again. Okay, that's called compensation for a loss. In a civil action, a class action, what happens is, yeah, there's still the compensation or compensatory damages, but then they put the punitive damages on top, and those are the big ticket ones. Okay. So compensatory, we're gonna say there was $10 million that has to be refunded to the people that bought these vehicles, $10 million. But because you should have known better, Ford, we're gonna issue in punitive damages $100 million. That's the big ticket. So they learn, don't do this again. It's punitive, it's a punishment to the manufacturer. Okay, that's what class actions are looking for. Okay, is that punitive damage. Government negligence theory hold that the government was negligent for allowing harm and should make appropriate forms of compensation. Good luck suing the government for anything. It can happen, it probably has. Actually, there's one of Bivens, and it's in your books. What's it called? Bivens versus 7 government officials. It's got a weird title, something like that. Where Bivens kind of paved the way. How do you sue the government? So if you're interested, research Bivens. But you can.
You got a Federal Tort Claims Act, right?
That's part of it, but first, I think that's the first step. You have to petition the court, ask permission to sue them. It's ridiculous, but Bivens kind of did that. Equal protection theory says compensation should serve to ameliorate imbalances, make them right, make you whole in society, including the huge variation in crime risk faced by citizens living in different parts of the nation under different social conditions. They're just, well, there it is, equal. They're looking for parity. Just because you live in a wealthy neighborhood doesn't mean you should get more than those living in poverty. Okay? justice should be fair, should be equal. It's not. But they try. Humanitarian advocates compensation because of the suffering that the victims undergo. Yeah, good luck again. Can't even give you an example of something like that because I've never really seen it. Seen it in commercials where these tribes are at war in Africa, and the government is going to intercede and take them to, yeah, right. It doesn't really happen, but there's something that, in theory, is pretty cool. Social welfare says victims should be compensated if they are in need. And there are programs, unfortunately, these programs are often, how can I put it nicely? People abuse it. Okay? It's human nature. I've heard cases where I'm talking to, I think she was 16 at the time, already had a kid, was pregnant with another one, living at her mom's house, who had, I think, 6 or 7 kids. Love kids, but these kids were all different colors, shapes, sizes. The mom didn't care. Her goal was to tell her daughter, to teach her daughter, that the more kids you have, the more the government has to pay. It was a generational thing. I can't believe what I was hearing. And I remember because she had a tattoo. 16, she had a tattoo. I like tattoos, but not at 16. I said, well, and it looked fresh, it was still healing. I said, well, you live in the projects, you got nothing, how can you afford to buy a tattoo? And the 16-year-old was so happy, she goes, oh no, my mom paid for it. I said, really? Your mom took her down to a friend in the garage and paid the friend $40 or something. And I said, and this is the first time I ever heard of this term, EBT. EBT. She says, oh no, I just went and took $40 out of the EBT. I said, what the hell is an EBT? She goes, this is my welfare card. So she took money from the government to pay for a tattoo on a minor in a friend's garage. That's social welfare theory. That's abuse. Anybody want to argue, stick up for them? Say what they did was okay? No. Thank you. I have opinions. I'm old. I get to have opinions. Welfare, social welfare, to help an individual, I firmly believe. Everybody needs help. Whether you're elderly, you have special needs, maybe you just hit hard times. Absolutely, we should be there for each other to help get you through this temporary setback. Okay? It's not a lifestyle. Definitely not generational. And that's where we're at, guys. That's exactly where. Don't get me started on illegals. Okay? Illegals. Undocumented. Because that's not popular for me to say anything negative against illegals standing in this campus, but I have my opinions. And if you want to know what they are, I'll tell you later, because I should not go there. I like my job. Okay. Crime prevention theory holds that compensation programs encourage more citizens to report crime, thereby resulting in more effective law enforcement programs. Does that work? Oh, Dial a Snitch, Crime Stoppers, they got different programs, all pretty much the same. If you see something, say something, right? In theory, that works. I was teaching at campus, it was a night class in Memphis, and I had this one girl, she was from, she had moved, but she was from Compton, right, from Compton. Awesome. Her life experiences were golden. And I would ask her about that. And I said, what do you think about this? If you see something, say something. If you live where I did, snitches get stitches, and then she went on a rampage about how you don't, because the gangs will come and they're going to take care of you. They're going to kill you. They're going to hurt you. you're not gonna say a damn thing. Theory, guys, actually it even says theory, we should. In reality, probably, you're gonna think, how's this gonna affect me personally before I say something? True? Yeah. Well, if anybody disagrees, please tell me why you disagree. I'd love to hear your opinions. Yeah.
Should have said it was straight out of Compton.
Straight out of Compton. I was trying to remember, this was years ago, I was trying to remember, she was so awesome. Cause she had opinions about everything. Remember, we're talking theory, she lived it. And she would say, oh, that ain't right, and then she would just go off, man. So you go, tell me what it's like. Alright, so reality is a little different, theory. Political motives theory says that victims' compensation is in vogue with the voting public, and that any politician who seeks public office must inevitably support that concept. We're coming into an election year. You're gonna see a lot of commercials inundating the tubes. I'm not looking forward to that. Right? Vote for me. They always say they're tough on crime. Tough on crime, tough on crime. Support me and I'll do this for you. Make all kinds of empty promises. I hate it. I hate politics. My son lives and breathes politics. He has a podcast. He's a vet. And proud of him. Right? He was a corpsman. He saw more than he should have. We almost lost him. Came back, his head was fried. Suicidal tendencies and you name it, this kid went through it all. But he's on the other end now. So he's an advocate trying to help other vets stay away from taking their own lives. But he likes to delve into the politics. So we had Thanksgiving at the house, and I actually sat down for like 30 minutes, and we had a conversation. And it came into the political area. I listened to him, and then I said, that's enough. My blood starts to boil. I can't take it. My blood pressure goes high. Because it upsets me to know this happens all the time, and there's nothing I can do about it. So why get angry? Look at the price of fuel. In Missouri, I was paying $3.50 a gallon for diesel. Come home and I'm paying $5.60 something, I think it was. Why? California. First time in history, the census for California went down. People are leaving the state in droves because of the politics, the government. It's a beautiful state. It really is. I lived here my whole life. But I can't wait to get the hell out. Making plans for my exit. South Dakota looks nice. Missouri is beautiful. Even parts of Texas I like. And when I say I like it, the scenery's nice, but the politics, the taxes, they're friendly, especially on seniors, on income tax, property tax. When you get older, you'll understand how important that is. Yeah. So anyway, political, whatever the climate is, marijuana is good for you. Vote for me. And post-crime victimization. Problems of the victim that follow from the initial victimization after the fact, such as loss of employment, inability to pay medical bills, insensitivity of family members, and on and on and on. Being ridiculed, there's a sense that you're less than. It's a terrible feeling. And being compensated a few $1,000s isn't gonna ever take that sting away. Let's check this out.
I really like spoons.
Yeah.
When you're a daughter, because the system, the people thought that I was unfit. What if one afternoon, while you're at home watching your daytime favourite, you get a phone call that your husband at the time has been accused of committing a serious crime. And what if you're the daughter of this man and you have to go to school the next day like nothing's happened? Or perhaps you were out the night before and you're the father of this man. These are all invisible victims of crime. Now, please don't get me wrong. I don't want you to take anything away from the direct victims, victims that have been hurt, who have been abused and mistreated. But they also have mothers, and they have fathers, they have sisters and brothers. What about them? Where's their voice? I'm here today to talk to you about them, to talk to you about us and about me. People that often go unnoticed because everyone thinks we can cope, but deep down we are crushed. People who look so strong on the outside, look like they have it all together, but deep down we're struggling. I want you to expand your thinking, your awareness, and even your compassion to those people who hurt too. Now, there's been an increase in the types of violent crime that has a significant harm to people. You'll see that there's been a 27% increase in gun crime. You'll see there's a 26% increase in knife crime. Sexual offences have gone up by 19%, and stalking and harassment up by 37%. Now, these are just some of the stats that have been reported and recorded. But there's no stats for the hidden victims, and their world has been shattered too. So I was like so many other people that suffered from the consequences of a crime not committed. I remember going to a supermarket. When I was in that supermarket, I saw two elderly women, standing and looking at a newspaper. And I remember looking over. And when I looked over, I saw a picture of my husband at the time on the front of the newspaper. And I stood back and I listened as they spoke in disgust. How could he do such a thing? How disgusting. And what about those poor kids? He should be castrated. And how did the wife not know? How could she not know what was going on under her own roof? And there I was standing behind them, watching I remember my heart was beating fast. I was the wife of the man they said should be castrated. I listened in embarrassment and in silence. And I remember my eyes started to sting because they started to fill with tears. I didn't plan any of this, and I didn't want this for my life. Now, should I have said something to them? Should I have said that I had no idea what was going on? What would you have done? But I said nothing. I did nothing, and I stayed invisible. But they only said what other people have said to me to my face. Michelle, how did you not know? I was guilty by association. But their truth differed from my truth. My truth was that I tried to be the dutiful wife and to believe and trust in the one man that stole my heart from the age of 20. My truth was I didn't want to break our happy home and this idyllic lifestyle that we had created for ourselves. But the truth was I was traumatized. I was victimized and unaware that I had even become a victim. I fell into depression, and I struggled to be the mother I needed to be for my 4-year-old daughter. I remember I was in the bath one evening, and I came out of the bath and there's a mirror, and I looked at my naked reflection, and all this guilt just came over me, and I remember falling to the ground, just crying in tears. And then all the stress of the whole thing, which was in the newspapers, which was on ITV News, it led me to developing a condition called enuresis. Now, enuresis is a condition where you have no control over your bodily fluids, which meant that when I was stressed, I used to wet myself in public. And my daughter, I had to fight for my 4-year-old daughter because the system, the people thought that I was unfit. Now, this was so unfair because I was judged for not knowing, I was vilified for not seeing the signs, I was ostracized because I didn't control the actions of someone else. Now, does that seem fair to you? You see, how many of us have witnessed or heard about a crime? And the first thing we say is, where's the parents in all of this? Where's the fathers? Because we're always judging. We're encouraged to judge and make assumptions all the time. The mainstream media, social media, people, society, they influence the way we think, the way we feel, and how we judge, even though we have not been privy to the full details. But I decided one day when I was sitting in church that enough was enough. I refused to be a victim any longer. And I remember taking that pain and that shame, that guilt and embarrassment, and I turned it around into something good, into something great, where now I'm in a position where I can help both men and women become the best versions of themselves. And my daughter. I've left a legacy with my daughter where she has learned to be limitless and fearless and not to be defined by other people's opinions. In his interview with Oprah Winfrey, the Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, he encourages us all to show compassion in all events. And this is what I implore you to do too. We must refuse to normalize and make excuses for systematic victim blaming. And we should be led by compassion. Because we all hurt. We all hurt in different ways. But if we choose to be led with compassion, and if we judge less and to love more, there will be less invisible victims like me, and possibly like some of you, because our voices will be heard, and we will be counted. Thank you.
What do you think? Should do a good job explaining what it feels like, secondary victim. I'm guilty, guys. When she was saying how many of you sit there and said, how did the parents not know? How did they not know? These shootings that take place in the schools, and they took the dad's guns, or they were up to no good somehow. My wife and I, that's all we talk about. How the hell did the parents not know what's going on with their own kids? They should be held accountable. This video does a good job of highlighting. Sometimes they don't know. Not always. So should we give them the benefit of the doubt? That's up to you. It's an individual decision. Should you give them the benefit of the doubt? The secondary victim. Good friend of mine, real good friend of mine, called. We were in South Dakota during the summer, and they had just bought an RV. So he called. I said, "Oh, good. You're supposed to go up and meet us." And I said, "Hey, what's going on? You guys on your way?" He goes, "No, we're on our way to Oregon." Oregon? Yeah. He goes, "We're not gonna make it. My daughter just called. She just got home from work. Her husband committed suicide in their bedroom. Took a gun to his head. Killed himself just before she was supposed to be at the house. He despised her, hated her that much. And of course, she was going through all kinds of changes. I said, well, I didn't know he had committed suicide at the time. He just said he died." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And then he went off, and wow, he had nothing nice to say about this guy. Yeah. I said, well, you know, he is dead. He was good. That's what it should be. And then he got ugly. I couldn't calm him down. Talked to him again just about a month ago. I said, how's everything going? His daughter's doing much better. She relocated to Denver. She got out of, Oregon or Washington? No, I think it was Oregon. Got the hell out of there. She was in a bad relationship. But instead of just saying bye, let's go our separate ways, this guy actually took his own life in a place to spite her. Wow. I guess she still had feelings. She thought it could work. What about a secondary victim? That's about as extreme as it gets. She's still traumatized. Probably will never be the same. Think about it. Your spouse, a person, whether you're not in that same state of love as you once were, but you did have strong feelings for this individual enough to marry him, does that? How does that make you feel? She's still picking up the pieces. But that is the secondary victim. I'm gonna stop here. We'll finish on Wednesday. If you have questions, please come up and see me. If not, oh, let me take roll real quick. There's a couple of yes. Let's see. Lexi?
Here.
What I thought. Michelle? Jeremy? Justin? I'm not calling out everybody in your body. Mia?
Here.
Melissa Alvera. Nathan, Nate. Gabriella. Scott? Thanks. Connor? That's it. Adios. If I didn't call your name, that's because I already checked you.
Oh yeah, I guess I did the theme of restitution. I don't know if I tell you, I got into a car accident because